Hello, this is Mind the Gap, and I'm your host, Tim Dunn.
Please mind the gap.
Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of 6 of this second series of Mind the Gap, which means, of course, when we finish today, we do conclude our tour of London's Overground network names. Now, I knew at the start of this, I thought, this is going to be some kind of interesting ride, skirting around the edge of central London, occasionally going straight through it to the other side, out to where I've never been before, and yes, you've guessed it, that is an analogy for the type of experience that I've had on the way, because on this series so far, we really have met some extraordinary individuals and talked about all kinds of things that are just so way outside my own comfort zone and any kind of knowledge. And by that, yes, I do mean not directly related to trains. And you know what? I've loved every minute of this journey. I've learned more about the power of football, and oh boy, was I schooled by those lionesses, and the incredible stories of the Windrush generation, the dedication and incredible work of the Mildmay Hospital, the weird and wonderful history of the Liberty of Havering, and of course the generational and continuing power and importance of the suffragette movement. But you and I have just one last journey to make together on this podcast series, and in this episode we're featuring a subject I know, I'm going to say this, pretty much, entirely nothing at all about. I mean, nothing at all. The subject is weaving. The Weaver line on the London Overground stretches from the bustle of Liverpool Street out to Enfield Town, Cheshunt and Chingford. But what's the colour on the map, you ask? Well, it's a lovely maroon. Nice. But why on earth is it called the Weaver line? Well, my friends, production and trade in textiles has been a massive part of London's history, but most especially in the area around Spitalfields, Bethnal Green, Liverpool Street and Hackney, through which this line runs. Different communities of immigrants have shaped that area and that industry and the art behind it, including, most famously, I think, probably the Huguenots back in the 17th century. And there are Irish weavers in the 18th century, Jewish families towards the end of the 19th century in the Second World War, and then by the 60s, 1960s that is, Bangladeshi communities helped enhance the vibrancy of the area, and in all kinds of ways, including, of course, fashion and fabrics, and they do today as well. And a bit further up the line, we've got Walthamstow, home, of course, to William Morris, one of the most enduring British textile designers of all time. Well, that's the history, anyway. But I want to talk to someone who lives and breathes this stuff, which is why we've come to this little station here at Bethnal Green. The platform's up on the viaduct with the city in the distance over there and the skyscrapers, but down below, the terraced housing and the communities of Bethnal Green. Bang in the middle of Weaver Lounge. I'm here to meet someone very special, someone with a professional and also incredible family connection to weaving and the history of textile production in this part of London. Her name is Anna Ray. She is a remarkable artist whose story is one I can't wait for you to hear. So, let's go and meet her.
Next station, Bethnal Green.
Anna, it is so good to meet you. It's hard to know where to start, really, with you, I think, because you are a very accomplished, incredibly accomplished artist and maker as well. And your career is amazing, and you've won all sorts of awards. I know that, and I've read about this. But how would you describe yourself and the work that you do?
I would say that well, thank you for a start. Very nice. I would say that I'm a fine artist who specialises in stitch and textiles, but I trained unusually in tapestry at Edinburgh College of Art. And I learned to weave tapestries, make felt, but my emphasis was always on stitch and constructed textiles, really. Whether I'm working with velvet or wire or paint, each has its own quality and value. It's a bit like the William Morris idea of truth to materials. I like to see what a material or a medium can do.
And yet you've got Morris, I suppose, talking about how he has almost two-dimensional artwork, and yet here you are doing this three-dimensional wrangling of fabric into sort of wonderful shapes. It's almost the opposite in some ways. That's how I see it.
Yes, I think there's something about a magnification going on in my work. And when you're embroidering something, you're very close to it. The threads are small, but they seem very large when they're up close. Part of it is about an enlargement, a magnification of a textile. In simple terms, some of my sort of large wall pieces.
Okay, now I see it.
Bigger
okay.
isn't necessarily
loops,
better.
for example.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I didn't realise that. So that's where the looping I've seen you've been doing
Yes.
or comes from, and this idea of weaving. Well, let's take us back to basics, if you don't mind. We still got the weaver line.
Yes.
I didn't realise that the work you're doing actually is an enlargement or a microscopic version of those threads or the yarn used in weaving. But can you just explain to me, just back to the very basic of basics, what exactly is weaving? Help me out here.
Weaving is the interlacing of threads, or it could be of willow or of anything, basically. You can weave with paper. So it's the interlacing of elements to create a fabric or cloth or an object. A woven cloth is made with a warp and a weft, and the weft is passed across the warp, and the threads are crossing over each other and interlacing so that you have a strong material, basically. And then the weaving process can be expanded and adapted in thousands of ways depending on how that interlacing happens. Weaving is an incredibly technical, highly skilled craft, and it takes years to learn and also to become an expert. It's a technological, intellectual, mathematical, creative art form and requires huge skill and patience.
Actually,
I don't have. I am an observer of weavers.
Well,
and
a
collaborator.
I think you're a collaborator.
A happy collaborator with any weaver who will have me.
Now we're sitting here between the railway lines here at Bethnal Green Station. But why have you suggested we come here in particular?
Well, my family, my ancestors on both sides of the family, in the Ray, my surname, the Ray side, are French Huguenot descendants, and they all started out living in the East End in Bethnal Green here and in the surrounding areas. It's where my entire family is from.
You've come at this via quite an intriguing route, haven't you? You didn't start off being a thing yourself, I want to do family history. How has this come about?
Well, I was finishing my MA at Edinburgh College of Art, and I was embroidering with pure silk, and I was getting really fussy about materials. And then shortly afterwards, my dad phoned me up one day, and my grandfather had passed away the year before, and he was going through documents. And he phoned me up one day and said, "Anna, do you know that the ancestors were Huguenot silk weavers?" And I was in the 1700s, and I was like, "No, Dad, I didn't know that, but that makes, that's really interesting." So I must have been about 20. And then he sent me this document in the post, and I started reading through it and just thought it was like so exciting. And that the first person mentioned in this document was a man called Pierre Joinville, who came over from Saint-Pierre-le-Viger in Dieppe in Normandy, and he came over, he was born in 1713, and Pierre was a Huguenot, a Protestant, and they were being persecuted, but Pierre, being a skilled maker of Huguenot silks, was a refugee and came to Spitalfields to escape the persecution. He came on his own, and Spitalfields was an area that for at least 50 years had an influx of Huguenot refugees from France. And the word refugee actually comes from the Huguenots. Refuge is a French word, and it was first introduced into the language because of the Huguenots coming to the UK.
Why exactly did he come here, though, to Spital? You see, silk brought him here.
This was a place to come to with the skills that you had for survival, because in those days, if you learnt something like the difficulties of silk weaving, that would be your life's work. And Spitalfields had a burgeoning industry, but there were definitely dark spots over the coming 100 years where there was the healthy trade of silk, and then there were difficult times where there was the mechanisation of the looms came in, and it's a complex history. And at certain points the silk weavers were paid far less than other trades and had to really fight. They had to sort of stand up for themselves, but were terribly exploited, but worked really hard. That kind of commitment to working and surviving.
We've come through from Bethnal Green Station, a 10-minute walk, and here we are, down not far from Bethnal Green Road and the bustling heart of Shoreditch and City fringes. I can see over the back of the skyscrapers just over there, and we're by this cafe here. What is this building opposite? Because why have you brought us to this place?
Well, we're actually on Sclater Street, and Sclater Street was originally known as Slaughter Street, which is a rather dramatic, visceral street name, and Sclater Street is the first documented address of my ancestor Pierre Juanville in the mid-1700s. So there are 3 weavers' cottages still left standing. They're covered in graffiti at the moment.
They are, yeah.
Most of the street has been knocked down, but this street is known as being a street where weavers lived, and you can tell that because photographs of the street before some of the buildings were demolished and the houses we're looking at here have large windows on the higher floors,
yes,
which is where the weavers worked because there was good light for them to do this very, very fine work of threading threads. You needed good light to do work like that. The weavers themselves, I've understood that because they had to look after the materials they were given, that the silk they were given to weave with had a certain value. It was weighed when it was given to them, and because silk can absorb 30% of its own weight in moisture, if the silk dried out while they were working with it and gave it back, it would be weighed again once it was cloth, and if it was seen that the weight had changed, they would be in difficulty in terms of getting paid. And because of this strange fact, it meant that the weavers in their high studios with their big windows couldn't have the windows open. And so they lived with the windows not just closed but often sealed up to keep the moisture in the building. And this led to terrible respiratory illnesses. And so there was a lot of disease. And when I look at the family history, certain family members might have had 10 children and 5 survived. Further into Spitalfields, there's lovely, rather gentrified areas called Princelet Street and Fournier Street, and they are very good examples of houses where the master weavers lived. And you can tell the master weavers lived there because they have shutters outside, which seems very lovely and rather French, but actually it was to stop rioters, weavers who felt they were underpaid, from seeing into the houses and accessing the houses. They may also have been there for other reasons, but you'll see when you go down those streets that they're very distinct because of the shutters. So the master weavers will have had journeyman weavers working for them, and my ancestor Pierre was a journeyman weaver. While at first you think, oh, how wonderful, my ancestor was a weaver, this was not a romantic experience. This is very hard work and often low paid. But we have one ancestor, George, Pierre's great-great-grandson, and in the 1830s he was a financially successful fancy trimmings manufacturer, and he had 36 houses in Bethnal
36?
Green. Yeah, I don't know the exact addresses, and a factory in Bethnal Green. Sort of 80 years after Pierre was weaving on Sclater Street.
What was life like for Pierre, do you think? Can you describe what it would be like working as a weaver in one of these buildings at the time? What would it have been like for him? I think it will have been intense work. His wife and children may have participated in some of the work as well. Up until 1760, the silk weavers in this area had quite a positive experience, but after 1760, there were various legal changes and they were not being paid as well as they perhaps once were. So there were riots in the streets, and the master weavers, they were fighting essentially a sort of an intellectual and legal battle with the weavers themselves. In a number of cases, there was violence in the street, and even 2 Huguenots who had damaged some silk of a master weaver were hung in the street as an example of what happens if you dissent. So it was not a straightforward moment, I think, when Pierre was living here. Jobs came and went because of automation. So the history of making in this area, it's always moving and changing. We're in the shadow here of the Overground itself, aren't we? I mean, but how did you feel when you heard that they're going to name a line the Weaver line?
I was just really delighted because it's a miraculous process that should be valued and treasured, and it's something that people can learn about, and it's a difficult process that people could be educated in or have a go at if they ever wanted to learn to weave. You know, I just think it's wonderful to celebrate making and celebrate handmade things. Calling it the Weaver line just will make people look out of the window, and maybe they'll think to stop and go and have a little nosy around. Giving a train line an interesting name is inspiring, just as simple as that.
Do you consider yourself an inspiration to people as well?
I think I've been so inspired in my life by people close to me who could make things. So my mother, my grandmother, my lecturer at Edinburgh College of Art, Maureen Hodge, who was the first female weaver at the Edinburgh Tapestry Company. So sort of I know how I've been inspired by people I know and what they've made, and further afield, artworks by Picasso and Seurat and, people more out of reach. So I know that anyone can be an artist in a way, and that we can all make and we can all find pleasure in making. So I think inspiration comes from all sorts of places, but it certainly comes from the people I know closely and love.
Wow, and that really blew me away, really. I could have spoken to Anna for absolutely hours about the history of this place and her family and her craft as well. I do love meeting people who are so passionate about their day job. And I'm so happy for Anna that she clearly loves what she does so very much, and she really does exemplify, perhaps, what we've been talking about on this series so far, that she continues the legacy of her ancestors, but in her own very personal style, which is hers alone. Now, I'm back on the train now, as you can probably hear, and I've sat down in this seat, this famous fabric used on TfL services, which of course you might know is called moquette. But hang on a minute, this might blow your mind, but this stuff is actually woven as well. Woven on the weaver line. Well, woven for the weaver line anyway. The legacy of weaving lives on in every single seat you sit on board buses and trams and tube trains and DLR trains. But how is moquette made, and what's the process? What exactly is this stuff you put your bottom on every day anyway? I'm about to find out at the next station with the help of Honor Clough from a company called Camira.
Next station, Hackney Downs.
Oh, okay, we're sitting here on the station platform here at Hackney Downs, the train going through, and I'm delighted to be joined by Honor. Now, Honor, you are from Camira Fabrics, aren't you? So tell me, what exactly is your role at Camira?
So I'm the area business manager at Camira, and that basically means that I look after the accounts. I focus on UK and Western Europe rail, TfL being one of our biggest customers.
Camira Fabrics, exactly what do you guys do for TfL?
Well, we do a lot of things for TfL. We like to get involved in many things, but our main role is to bring their designs to life. So they will send us designs, we make sure that it's weavable, and then we weave it, and it goes onto the tubes, the overground, underground, all over.
I hate saying the word weave, which is appropriate for the weaver line, but exactly what fabric are you weaving here? Because we haven't got curtains on the underground, have we?
No, we haven't. We're weaving moquette. Moquette's the French word for carpet. Very hard wearing. Great abrasion, and also good colours to have some wacky patterns on there.
What exactly is the fabric or the thread you're using in moquette? Is it just wool? Is it cotton? I've got no idea, actually. I've got no idea what I'm sitting on the whole time. What is it?
So the official composition is 85% wool, 15% nylon, and then the backing is 100% cotton backing. Yes, within our different capabilities we do have slightly different compositions, but that's the main one that we weave on.
That's a very long train going through. There's a lot of moquette on that train. I haven't got your eye on those ones as another customer. So look at the seats you can make for that. Just thinking about this, what is the life cycle of moquette? How does it go from design to finish?
So once we've done the design stage, the sampling stage, and everything's been approved, we get the order from the seat maker. So we dye the yarn. All our yarn is dyed in Yorkshire in our factory, but then the yarn's shipped to Lithuania.
Wow. This is on big rolls, big spools, I guess.
So it's on what we call cheeses.
Cheeses?
Yeah, so basically plastic tubes with yarn wrapped around them, but we call them cheeses.
Okay.
It's 150 centimetres wide, okay, and then an average roll length is around about 25 metres. The reason why it's in Lithuania is the sheer size of these looms. We couldn't fit them in our current factory at the time.
How big is your loom, Honor?
I've never been asked that before. And then once it's ready to be woven, it goes onto the loom, but it's called creeling. So creeling is basically putting the cheeses onto the loom and threading all the yarn into the start of the machine for it to start weaving. All the moquette for TFL's woven on a Metex loom, and a Metex loom produces one piece at a time. You have what's called a warp, which is the cotton, the backing. So the colours of the design and the warp, which is like a grey colour, are knotted together, and then that's what goes through the loom to weave the design. So you've got your warp and your weft, basically.
Oh, your weft. Oh, I love this chat. We've got warp and weft.
Yeah, so your warp is basically like your backing and things like that, and your weft is what's going across the loom to make the design. And you'll have the cut and loop within the design. So that fires across the blades, and then the blades for the cut will obviously slide back out, but then for the cut part they slide up, and that's what makes the cut pile. We do them in batches of around 300 to 400 metres. You could say if you looked at a loom it looks easy, but you've got to have that skill. Nobody can just switch a loom on and know how to work it. You've got to have that skill of knowing how everything works and checking that obviously everything's weaving correctly.
These are computerised looms now, aren't they? Because this design is repeated.
You'll be surprised to know that it's still a floppy disk.
What?
Yep, so the designs are pretty much on a floppy disk, and that's what's put into the loom. So yes, it is electronic, but we're still working with floppy disks. So yeah, everything, it's woven in Lithuania, but then it's shipped back to the UK for all the finishing, having the chemicals applied for the flammability rating, and then it gets like a crop and a bath kind of thing before it becomes a sellable product. So that's all done in the UK.
There's a train coming in now. This is what? Here, it's an overground line. Here we go. Here comes one now. You must be proud of the stuff that your team and your colleagues and you do, right?
Yeah, definitely. We've celebrated 200 years, so I've definitely not been a part of that whole 200 years, but I still feel proud of things that was done 200 years ago, because I know that the time and the effort that goes into it, and it's not just about weaving fabric, it's obviously, like I said, about the colours and the designs and having those little hidden things within the design that some people don't notice, but we do.
Now look, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but if you ever looked at the tube map with all the overground lines in the different colours going over and under each other all over the place, and thought it's almost a little bit like weaving, perhaps, like a big tapestry of London? Or is that just me for this episode? Okay, it isn't. Okay, look, okay, fair enough, maybe. Look, we know how the moquette is woven and made now. Thanks very much to Honor for making that trip down to tell us all about that from Yorkshire. Now, next question, though. Who actually gets to decide what those patterns are and what the colours are and so on? Those designs you and I love so very much, that are underneath our bottoms all the way on every journey we make. Well, I'm going to talk now to the wonderful Claire Dilnot-Smith, who is one of the designers from TFL who works on this moquette, to find out a bit more about this. And it's our very last stop on this Weaver Line journey. Claire, first of all, what exactly is your role at TFL and what do you do?
So I'm a product and industrial designer at Transport for London, and I work in a really small design team consisting of me, Paul and Pablo, and we design the moquette fabric that you see on London's tube trains, trams, the DLR and also some buses. We've decided to design the moquette in-house now, so we're designing all the future moquettes, but we also do products for the station environment, and we look at individual products on the trains themselves, and we're very much involved in the colours, materials and finishes inside the train. For example, on the new Piccadilly line trains, we've been very involved in that, and also the new DLR trains as well.
Oh, a cracking job you've got, and you're responsible for so many of our journeys we make around the city. But talk about the overground. Let's first talk about that first of all, because there's so many amazing designs. Could you tell me about the history of the design we currently see on the overground right now? What's the story behind it?
Yep, so the original overground moquette was actually designed in 2008 by a London-based design company called Wallace Sewell, and then in 2016 it was recoloured. And we decided to keep the orange colour, as that represents the overground line, but we made the orange a much richer orange to sort of deepen the colour palette. And then the yellow on the new maquette represents the marigolds that were seen on a journey on the Overground line, and the green represents the leafy suburbs that the line passes through.
It's come from the heart then, really, this whole design.
Yeah, definitely, and with a lot of the newer maquettes, we try to really put a story behind the design, and it helps really give that line an identity as well.
Quite a few of these maquettes have got names, haven't they, I think? I think one's called Barman, is that right?
That's right, yeah. I think a lot of people just refer to them as sort of the Jubilee line maquette or the Victoria line maquette, but actually they do have names. And the Barman is the maquette that you see on a lot of the tube trains in London, actually. It's on Northern Line, Central Line, Bakerloo Line, and it's the maquette that's got lots of different landmarks. So sometimes it's referred to as the landmark maquette, but the actual name is the Barman, and that's after Christian Barman, who was a former London transport officer. Recently, for the Central Line, we've designed a new maquette, and that one is actually called Tuppenny, because the Central Line used to be called the Tuppenny Tube when it first opened. Since I joined in 2018, I've been involved in lots of the new maquettes. So we've designed a new maquette for the Piccadilly line, and this one is quite exciting because it brings in a lot of Charles Holden architecture, who designed a lot of the stations in the 1920s and 1930s. So it features Southgate Station and a lot of his architectural features, such as windows. I've also been involved in a new maquette that you'll see on the new DLR trains. And there are also several other new ones coming up, but I'm not sure if I'm allowed to share the names of those with you yet.
Oh, I can't believe it. Almost got a scoop there.
Maquette's a really exciting fabric, but there are constraints that we have to work to. We try and design the pattern as a small tile, which we then repeat over the size of the fabric. We have to think about, firstly, the scale of this tile. So we like to keep it quite small so that it's easy to line the pattern up from one seat to the next. But then it can't be too small because it will then make the interior look quite busy. We also have to think about the colours that we use. We usually like to use mid-tone to dark colours because that fabric is going to be on the train for a long time and it's going to be used every day. So a light fabric is not very practical. And the overall colour of that fabric has to contrast really well with other elements in the interior. For example, the maquette will need to contrast really well with the grab poles and with the armrests so that visually impaired customers can navigate their way through that interior really easily. The pattern of the maquette influences how many colours we can use in the design as well. So sometimes you'll see lots of colours, other times we're very restricted to 4 colours if it's a bit more of a complicated pattern. We also have to think about the priority maquette as well. So TfL's approach now is to incorporate a priority maquette alongside the standard. So it's using the same pattern but in an almost inverted colourway, and sometimes we'll bring in a new colour. And you'll see these priority seats near the doors, often of tube trains and trams, and they will feature a large turquoise badge. That priority maquette, the idea is that it stands out from the standard and it really helps those people that need that seat to find it. So we have to think about 2 maquettes, how they might work together and also how they'll work within the interior of the train as well. So there's lots of different things to think about all at the same time.
One of your many, many things on your design brief, I guess, that comes to you at the start of a project. But I mean, how long does it take to design one of these maquettes or design? And is there special software involved? Because I think of it almost like a pixel design on a computer, like little blocks of how you design it. Is that how it comes together? How does it work?
Yeah, it is like that. We do design it in terms of pixels because the individual tufts, which we call pix, create the overall image. So if you were designing a circle, for example, it would be made up of lots of different pix. So we have to consider the scale of that circle. If we reduce it too small, it's going to look quite pixelated. But there's a lot of stages that we do before we even get to actually designing. For example, the research stage. We like to think about what might influence us. We start to think about the line itself, the history, the heritage of the line. We go out on the line, we take photographs, we take sketchbooks, and maybe we'll just sketch a few small architectural features or something that we might bring together into a design. And then when we feel like we're starting to create a design, we can then start using the computer software to create a graphic. And we'll often come up with a couple of different designs. So we like to sample a few different designs. Camira will produce those for us. It will take about 6 weeks between each round of sampling, and then it's really exciting to get them back. So it's gone from that initial sketch and the initial research, and then suddenly you see it as a fabric, and then we develop it on from there, do another round of sampling, really try to get those colours right and the design right, and then one more round of sampling, and then we finally end up with a finished maquette that we're happy with.
I think there'll be loads of people listening to this right now who are so jealous of your job. I mean, you're an in-house designer of one of the most iconic brands in the world. And have you always wanted to do something like this? Is this been your kind of your thing, your North Star you wanted to try and achieve?
I've always been creative. I always knew I wanted to do a creative job of some sort, and I trained as a product designer, so I'm used to designing furniture and lighting, and I still get to do that at TfL, but we were given this opportunity to design the fabric in-house, and it's actually really exciting because I'm involved in all the interiors. I'm looking at the flooring, I'm looking at the armrests, the wall colours, so why not design the fabric itself as well? Now, I've always been really interested in fabric design and the effect it can have on an interior and how it can bring everything within the interior together. So I'm really excited to use my skills to help design the fabrics for TfL.
Well, look at that. I never thought at the start of this project I'd be lining up stories about the Huguenots and weaving this story together for this tapestry of stories that is London about the Overground. And what a terrific opportunity that's been, and actually a strangely natural one it actually feels to do. Those brilliant contributors we've had today, all three women talking a very different story, a different tale about weaving, of course, bringing it back to this railway line. And this Overground, of course, is a massively important part of transport in London. I think maybe it's fair to say that the Overground hasn't had enough love, perhaps, as it does now in the past. Yeah, this whole project, to name all the lines, I think is actually really rather lovely. People who live around them and who use these things, it gives them a sense of identity and a sense of place. And hopefully it'll inspire some new conversations, as well, of course, as it being easier to navigate around all these different parts of London that the Overground actually serves. But how wonderful it can inspire new learning and new understanding, because it certainly has with me. Thank you so much for joining me and all the contributors on this wonderful journey we've made through time and space, through this place we call London. And if you haven't listened to the other episodes we've done, do take a listen across the series back on all place you find your podcasts and download them. Perhaps sometime in the future we'll be back with more episodes of this podcast, but until then, please do mind the gap. Thanks for listening to Mind the Gap. I've been your host, Tim Dunn, and this is a podcast by 1860 for TfL. The producer was Verity DeCarla. The executive producer for 1860 is Gareth Evans, and the mix is by Rowan Bishop. The executive producer for TfL is Adrian Hyatt, and I'd just like to say a very big thank you to all the contributors who have joined us throughout this whole series. Thank you so very much.